So today I'm very happy to have a wonderful guest here with me. Her name is Lisa Garrelts, and she's the founder and CEO of NeuroMinds. And she knows a lot about the life as a person who is neurodivergent. So when we have autism or ADHD, we encounter certain specific problems in life. And one of those problems is that we are often artificially pathologized and artificially criminalized. And in most cases, we're misdiagnosed before we actually find out what's really going on. So, do you think there is something that we can do in order to advocate better for ourselves when we speak to a doctor so that we get less of all of these misunderstandings?
Oh, yes, that is a very, very good question. I think that's not only my experience that I'm sharing now, this is also the experience of a lot of clients that we have, and as well from people from the neurodivergent community, that doctors, especially psychiatrists, they have very, very outdated frames to assess ADHD, autism, etc. And they're coming from an angle of the 90s, 2000s, where neurodivergence was still pathologized in a way that it's a disease or a disability. But nowadays we know that it's systemic and there is nothing wrong with neurodivergence. The brain is just operating on a different system. So I think the advocating part comes down still in 2026, unfortunately, to finding the right doctor. So recommendations are important. Seeking who has made what kind of experiences with which doctor, because at the moment, what I see as well is you go to the doctor and you say that you know that you have ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, HSP, whatnot. And the doctor is saying, like, no, you cannot have that because you have a proper job, you're making a lot of money, you have a family, you are thriving. So the whole gaslighting aspect is, I think, something where the advocacy, unfortunately, often doesn't make sense, because the best way is to get out of the room immediately. That's the best advocacy that you can do for yourself, because you don't want to be gaslighted. And if you are neurodivergent, usually you know that you have been different from the rest of the world your entire life. So once you know, you know. And I made the experience over the past 36 years that if you're trying to convince people, it doesn't work. They have to be at a point in their lives, as well, psychiatrists, where they say, I want to expand my horizon. I want to learn more about it. I want to set the record straight. And if that point has not been reached in that person, it is very difficult to convince them otherwise. So I think the advocacy starts with, as well as setting boundaries and be like, okay, if someone's trying to gaslight me into something that I am, I think this is a very good point to just say, okay, probably I should leave the room because it doesn't make sense to have a conversation here. It
So,
takes my energy, and it also takes, yeah.
do you think that there is a difference between when we go to a doctor that is paid by the state health insurance or a doctor that we pay cash by ourselves? Because I have seen a huge difference. For example, I know that
Yeah.
I have dyscalculia and my parents know it, my teachers from school know it, my teachers from the university know it. But then I go to
Mm-hmm.
this one psychiatrist who does that testing with me, and everybody knows I have it, and she writes down I do not have dyscalculia. So just because she's from the state insurance, just because the
Mm-hmm.
state
Mm-hmm.
insurance rewards her for writing misdiagnoses. Okay. So now I have to go search for somebody who does that for money, and in most cases it costs like 1,500 euros or something to do that for a grown-up
Yeah.
in Austria. So do you also have an experience where you say it was absolutely clear that the person who works for money, who I actually pay either cash or by card, will give me a more correct diagnosis than the person who works for the state insurance?
Yes, I've heard a few stories, and I personally haven't had an experience because I was really lucky that I had a really good psychiatrist that really has the full spectrum of knowledge, which was great, but that's an absolute utmost exception. So most of the times, anything that is coming from the government at the state is usually mass work. They have masses of people, they have masses of appointments, so they have no time. So what they do is Bandabfertigung. I don't know how to say in English, you know. So you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
come in, you have a few minutes, and then you fuck off. So this is basically like what's coming from the state. If you have a private doctor, the charges are different. If you have a private insurance, charges are different. So obviously they have more time. Usually they generally have more time for doing like extracurricular activities, and also like gaining new knowledge and doing like the further education that is needed, especially in the field of neurodivergence. So the more time you have, the more proper you can evaluate and assess. So yes, there is definitely a difference, which is a pity. But I have another sentiment as well, or two sentiments. One is sometimes I feel that there is people, especially in my circle of friends as well, they don't need an official diagnosis. They don't need it because they don't need medication. They're okay. Yes, they struggle with certain things. Yes, they have their like issues as everyone else in life, but they are coping very well and they don't need any medication. If you do not need a medication, I mean, I don't want to do like a proper advertisement or something like that, but I created this holistic test, which is $29. It's relatively cheap and it gives you like a holistic view on what are your key strengths, no deficit language, what are your strengths and what you need to succeed. So sometimes I think this is a good way to at least have a little bit of clarity. But if you want to go a step further, it can also support you, if you download it, to go to the doctor and say, hey, look, this is my evaluation. This is the test result. Please, let's build the bricks upon that foundation, you know. So it can help, and it really depends, and it's very personal if you need an official diagnosis or not. And unfortunately, I have also seen in the community neurodivergents that say, oh, I'm just not going to doctors because I entirely distrust them, which I totally understand as well. So they are trying to help themselves. But this is why, as well, there is platforms like NeuroMinds and other platforms that are going outside of the system. So you can actually get the support that is much more affordable than if you go with the healthcare system in most countries. Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you an example from my life for the next question, and it might
Mm-hmm.
be a little longer. So
Mm-hmm.
I used to work in a company that was highly political, and I had an incident with somebody who ran up to me and started shaking me and slapping me and stuff like that, you know, a work colleague. And I went to
Oh,
the
wow.
cops and said, okay, this work colleague basically attacked me. That was a kind of assault. And the cops said, okay, as this person is a politician and you are a nobody, we will just flip the script. We will say you are dangerous and he is perfectly fine. So afterwards, we had like an ongoing
Mm,
court case. And at the court, I was very, very interested in the question as to why he did that. So I listened really closely what the people say, who is saying what, because it was important for me to find out why in the first place he had this idea to run up to me throughout the entire room and do this. And in the end, the cleaning lady said to the judge, Tania was standing over there doing nothing and saying nothing. And I thought that is so frightening that I have to go get him. And that was a key moment for me to finally understand. We as autistics, when we stand somewhere and we do nothing, we say nothing, and all we do is basically breathing, we look terrifying to others because in their fantasy, you know, I have no idea what's going on in their fantasy about us, but definitely they see us, as long as we're standing and doing nothing and breathing, as super highly dangerous. So is there
mm,
anything that we can do? Because this happened like 2 times in my life, that somebody just without any kind of provocation ran up to me and started beating me. And I never
mm-hmm,
had any idea why, you know,
mm-hmm.
until later I found out. So is there anything we can do that people do not perceive us as super dangerous just when we stand somewhere and look into the ether and do nothing?
I mean, first of all, a lot of neurodivergents are suspect to a greater exposure to violence, unfortunately. This is like something that is happening over and over again. I have learned that other people's perceptions, feelings, reactions is none of my business, not my problem. This is up to them. However, um, I think the terrifying aspect is usually when you have people with zero confidence and you just enter the room, because all we are as humans is energy. We have an aura, we are energy, and usually neurodivergents are confident within themselves. That is over time as well sometimes taken away by all the negative perceptions and messages that we receive. But overall, this is a threat to power. Even though we don't, I'm just speaking for the community now, but probably there are exceptions, but neurodivergents don't give a fuck, you know, who is in front of us, who has what to say, who is like, we don't care. If you're a cool person, we are cool. But at the end of the day, we are a mirror. So if a person is approaching us with a very negative or a very negative energy, we will mirror that back. And this is usually something where they misunderstand the cues for themselves. And this is where some certain attacks, etc., are happening. I mean, there's plenty of stories like on the internet, which we can read about it. But to be honest, I think at the end of the day, there is not much we can do except setting boundaries. Boundaries. If someone would walk up to me just like that, oh my God, I'd just be like, what the fuck? Like, fuck off. Like, no. Luckily, to that extent, it never happened to me. It happened like in very different situations where things have been already like heated, fights, partnerships, etc., friendships. But I think setting very, very sharp boundaries is even more important for neurodivergence, and maybe learning to give a little bit less of a fuck, because when we are in threatening environments, our energy is shifting as well, because usually we sponge up the energy and then our energy is changing. So the question is, how can we protect ourselves? I'm wearing, for example, like the green stone that is protecting my energy from others. And it works because it's like a psychological mechanism that you can actually put into yourself. And then it becomes a little bit easier to also stay soft in environments that are threatening, because you're just like, okay, your problem. This is you. This is your energy, your thing. It's not me. It's not mine. So you can stay dilly-dally and happy, you know, while others are just going wild with themselves. And I started as well, like feeling really sorry for these people, because I think that they just really hate themselves to a great extent. And that's a very, very bad position to be in. So, yeah. But of course, for neurodivergence, I mean, it's fucked. Let's face it.
And for
Yeah.
me, it's my golden cross. So I have the same as you. There always is some kind of talisman that protects us, right? So,
Yes.
what are the most common misdiagnoses that you see among gifted, highly intelligent autistic adults, and which ones concern you the most?
I think the most depression, because depression can be a comorbidity of neurodivergence when you are in the wrong environment. Can also happen in exceptional cases as well, but I think that's the most common one, where psychiatrists are putting neurodivergence on antidepressants, even though they just need a change. They just need an environment change, and that's it. And that's a very, very dangerous one. The most common that I see is bipolar, which is as well very dangerous, because bipolar needs a very different treatment than ADHD and autism. And ADHD and autism, to be very honest, I'm just putting it out there because I'm also tired of bullshitting around. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad condition. You are not by default disabled or like having a disease or something like that. It's like once you change your environment, everything will be super cool and easy. You know, not always. Of course, you still have your struggles. You have a past. You probably have CPTSD and traumas and all these kind of things. That's a different story. But like, there's nothing wrong with you. So once you change your environment, that's it. You don't need a treatment from a doctor per se, unless you have like extraordinary responsibilities, like bringing your kids to school at 7:30 sharp in the morning and have to prepare breakfast, and you need to wake up at 5, and you're a mother and then you go to work. I mean, this is a lot for an ADHD brain to do. So probably medication would make sense, even though it's a very personal decision. But I feel that yeah, I think those are the most common ones. And general anxiety disorder as well is a very common misdiagnosis. And honestly, I really hope that in 20 years from now, we don't even have to talk about neurodiversity and neurodivergence anymore. It's going to be exactly the same thing as being gay and lesbian in the 80s, where it was still like in the books, in the medical landscape, that it's a disease. No, the same thing applies to neurodivergence. So once we have greater acceptance and once we can have our environments and can just be ourselves, things are entirely changing. And I see already like big changes coming. So I'm very hopeful. Yeah.
Yes. So even though you're hopeful, I just want to go back to that point once again where you said change of environment. Because
Yeah.
honestly, if you grow up in a narcissistic family, that narcissistic family will keep you in financial dependence. They will not let you out of their lives ever. So I know exactly because I come from something like that. So shortly before I
Mm,
could get my thesis, my degree done at the university, they said they're pulling
yeah.
away all of their money from me so that I cannot finish the university and I get no job and nothing. So basically, my
Mm,
entire life basis was destroyed, and then my car
yeah.
was gone, my health was gone, etc. pp. And then when I finally had the possibility to work again after about 3 or 4 years, then they started sending the cops in. So they told the cops that I was dangerous, and the cops came to my employer and told the employer that I was dangerous and stuff like that, either to myself or others. And then I lost job after job after job. And after 5 years of this police investigation, that maybe I cannot prove it, maybe my family, but also in
Mm,
co-working with these people from the politician story I told you before. After that, my
yeah.
entire life was ruined. Like there was nothing left that I could use in any way. So then I
Yeah.
said, okay, what can I do now? And I realized
Mm,
there's actually absolutely nothing I can do because on the job market, nobody takes me anymore because I have a very bad reputation now due to these years and years of misinterpretations and lies. And I cannot get self-employed because in Austria, the law says it's not allowed to go from welfare to self-employment unless you pay the entire amount of welfare back, which would be around 60, 70,000 now. Of course, I would need to win the lottery to ever get out of this. So for me personally, I can say there is absolutely financially no way to ever get out of this. How would you recommend? Because I mean, I found my personal way of how
mm.
I deal with it, yeah. But what is your
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
recommendation
yeah.
for people like me who actually really have no other way than to accept that their life it went to shit and is beyond repair, basically?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard similar stories like in the last years over and so thanks for sharing that very vulnerable part of your life. And I feel, let me collect my thoughts. Um, First of all, like being in toxic and narcissistic family dynamics is something that a lot of neurodivergents face because one thing can also exist with the other, right? So you have sometimes very dysregulated households where things are just wild, wild west. And that's very, very common. It's a common dynamic. Um, I think the dependency is something that sucks because as a child, you are vulnerable to your parents. Your parents are your caregivers. They should be taking care of you, but they have been abusing and misusing their power, basically, towards you, which is a no go. I understand the situation with also the invalidity insurance or welfare that you get from the country. This is as well very common, especially for autistic people, which is horrible. That's also, but I'm getting there later, a product that I'm building right now to set the record straight for companies so we can dissolve like the economic issues. But I think my first question to you would be, what's holding you in Vienna? Why do you stay in Austria?
The only way I can eat and have a roof over my head is because I live with my parents and I eat from their fridge. The money that I get from the state is so terribly low. It would never pay food or housing or electricity or any of my other needs. And I have huge costs due to my disability because I have asthma and psoriasis and other problems concerning my autoimmune system. So I need a ton
Yep.
of money just for the therapy, which I have to pay for myself. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
supplements that I have to take is an enormous
Yep.
cost. So if I pay all of that, there is nothing left of the money. So I have to live with my parents. There's absolutely no way I can get out of this without a lottery win.
So, but your parents are the ones that have been raising you with codependence and you abusing their power towards you, or
The
was it
thing
your
the
parents?
thing is, like narcissistic parents, they need this that they look to the outside like the wonderful, wonderful
Ah, yeah, of
saviors.
course. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
to keep up this savior complex, they have taken me in, and now they run around like, "Oh, our daughter, she's so sick, and now we took her in because we are so nice parents. It's not that we destroyed her life before. We're so nice." So that is the kind of thing that they want to have on the outside, you know, because for them it's always about what other people think of
Mm,
them, that their status on the outside is still good, you know, while in reality, of course, everything is in
classic.
ruins.
It's very classic, unfortunately. Honestly, if you want to find ways, there will be ways. And I've learned the hard way that my mindset can keep me stuck or can keep me going. And even though I had as well multiple traumas, etc., we all have a lot of like very similar experiences. There is ways. And the thing is, I personally, if I have just one toxic person that is entering my life, and I do not give a fuck if it's a partner, parents, friend, whoever it is, toxicity is something that I keep now out of my life. And I had a rock bottom moment as well. That was completely rock bottom. No money, no nothing, zero. And I was in, or I am in one of the most expensive countries in the world, which is Switzerland. So I think there is ways out, which is friends, which is community.
Zero.
Community is very important because, but I think there is communities in Austria as well, like neurodivergent communities,
Nobody would
you
take
know?
you in their home, that a complete stranger in their home, and just give them
Mm,
food and shelter for free. That's just not happening.
mm, so what we have is we have this concept, and I think this is existing in many countries where you have community living. So basically, there is communities. They have like a small village in vertical commas where they have
We do
multiple
not have
houses
that.
next to each other.
Yeah.
You do not have that
And
because
especially even if we had it, I couldn't pay for it. There's no way.
No, because in the beginning they take you in, so you get back on your feet, you know, which takes a bit of time, but there is communities that are helping and supporting each other. It is existing, it is happening already, because we also see since a few years we have economic crisis, which means that we don't have enough jobs. Due to AI, a lot of companies and CEOs think that they can now fire people, etc., which is bullshit. Because the numbers and the data shows very different, that AI is even more expensive due to different reasons, not accommodating customers anymore, etc., in the right way. So there is many elements where we see that things are shifting now, and we have to go back to communities because people will not be able long term to just be everyone for themselves on their own feet. Individualism will not work anymore. So I see that we are moving towards communities, because if we have so many people on earth where everyone should be or supposed to be doing their own life, earning their own money, doing everything by themselves, yeah, it sounds like better for capitalism because you would spend more money as a single individual. But I think as well that not only the neurodivergent community, but also other communities have identified that. And this is as well the best way to kill the capitalism as well, you know, So communities coming together. I personally, I can just advise to research a little bit, to Google a little bit. Where are these communities? Maybe in Austria there is something hidden, because if you don't know the people, they will not tell you like where is what. Sometimes you find something online in forums, etc. It is possible, but I found out, for example, through someone that I randomly met at an event. So there was an event, it was physical, there was 20 people coming together, a lot of neurodivergents, trauma healers, uh, um, uh, shamans, etc. They were all coming together, and through one lady, I found out that she is living in such a community in Switzerland, you know. So these things are existing. And I think obviously they are not popular yet because it's not normal, it's not the usual, you know, but we are getting there and these communities are existing. So my advice would be to really dig your nose a little bit deeper, going to different events where people really physically come together, talk about the issues that you had, and find a way where you can have people coming together and support you, because in community you are as well energetically much stronger than if you have one friend that would take you home, for example. You know, that's usually not going to happen, but in communities and in community setups it's much easier. And they, for them, it's not a lot if they have to spend like €1 a day for a meal for someone that needs to get back up on the feet. But I personally would really get toxic is keeping you stuck. And that's
Um,
the problem. The
Honestly,
stuckness is the problem.
the way I have seen it and the way I understood it was that healing in the exact environment that broke me was part of my journey, a very important one. And it was also part of their karma because they
Okay.
hated to the guts that I am here. They hated that I destroyed their
Mm-hmm.
beautiful retirement, you know? So for both sides, it was necessary because during the time that I stayed here,
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
also a little bit has changed in the mind of my parents. I think now they do not think anymore that I'm dangerous or that
Okay.
I'm taking drugs or that I would beat other people up or all of these fantasies that they had, they got a little bit less, you know, I think, at least I hope.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. 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 Okay.
okay, so let me see. You said that one thing that gives you hope is that these little communities where we can live together peacefully are slowly starting to build. Is there other things where you
Yeah.
can say that actually gives me a lot of hope for the future?
What gives me a lot of hope is that even linear neurotypical thinkers are slowly starting to wake up and seeing like the dynamics, what is happening in the world, how media is as well manipulating, etc. Like there are so many elements where a linear thinker usually doesn't have a great pattern recognition. You give them 20 data points and they think they're all like single data points, whereas the neurodivergent is just putting the big picture together. But I see that the masses in vertical commas, they also slowly start to wake up and see the systemic issues and the gaps that we have, because it also affects them. So what has been affected us neurodivergents for decades and decades and decades, being in these rigid structures and not allowing for different thinking, because it's easier to control like 8-9 billion people on the planet if they all function for the same system and how it should be. um, I see that it now affects as well neurotypical people with burnouts, low engagement, not only at work but also in life, just being constantly tired, exhausted. We live in times in polycrisis, so people have to get their asses up now. And this is something that gives me a lot of hope, because people finally realize what we know since decades. So I think this is now coming to the surface, which gives me a lot of hope that we can collectively, as a society, shift towards. We need the diversity, we need divergent thinking, we need new innovation, we need new systems. And whereas, let's say, linear thinkers are usually trying to improve systems, whereas neurodivergents, if you allow them, they will just destroy the entire thing and just build it new from scratch, which is usually more effective than trying to, you know, improve like the little things. So I have great hope that this is going to be coming to a better version for humans overall in the next couple of years. Yeah.
Yes, I also have the impression that autistics, when you let them fix something, they go straight to the core issue rather than just trying to fix little symptoms, because they know in the long
Yeah,
run this is not going to work. And I am also
tackling the root cause.
I also heard of some of these communities in Sweden that, for example, they bring together little children, kindergarten children, and then also grannies and grandpas so that they live together and that they can actually share
Yeah,
the afternoons outside in the sun and stuff. So I think that thought
exactly.
of bringing people together is very important. But of course, the powers that be, they of course want us separated as much as they can. The
Of
classical the
course.
classical, you shall stay in your little 15-minute city and you shall not leave that ghetto.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of like power dynamics at play, right? There was a wheel of power at some point that I saw. It was really interesting. So you have the psychopaths on top that are leading the world. Then you have the masses that are easy to be manipulated by the psychopaths. And then you have the masses that are marginalizing the neurodivergents that want to create a better world. But the neurodivergents, they don't care about status, about credentials, about whatever. They just do their thing. But there being a very interesting chart I looked at, which gave me a lot of, it was a light bulb moment where I was like, yeah, actually, that dynamic makes sense. And I think now that the majority is waking up, they see now that these dynamics are happening, what is happening, how is it happening, etc. And keeping different groups in vertical comma separated means that they have something to do. They're distracted. So the psychopaths can continue their games and continue their stuff, I don't want to go into details. I think everyone that can count to 3 knows exactly what's going on and why distraction is a powerful tool to keep the more, let's say, darker spirits and dynamics active. But I think that is coming to an end because light has always been stronger than darkness. And I think, something's coming up and it's going to be
Yeah.
very positive. I
We
know it.
definitely we definitely live in the apocalypsis, which means the lifting of the veil.
Yeah,
We live in the end times, the biblical end times, and this is the change
exactly.
from the Kali Yuga to the Golden Age. So of course there is a lot of things are going to break up and break open, and things are going to start being very visible to people, and they're going to get more other ideas of how the
Yes.
world is really being run in the background and stuff. So yes, all of these things are coming up. So,
Yeah.
just to finalize that interview, because we are on our last 5 minutes, is there anything you want to say where you say, if only you remember one sentence or one thing from this entire interview and the entire world can hear you, what would you say?
I think I love to say that as humanity and as a society, the only thing that is going to flip the script and save all of us and everything, and that we have a happy and fulfilling life for all of us on this planet is love. Love to myself, love to my neighbor, love to whoever I'm encountering. I try to meet people with love. And sometimes, even if it's hard, and sometimes, even if I say things like, oh, I hate people, when I'm overstimulated, I'm in crowded places, and I say, I hate people. Yeah, it's just my overstimulated ass talking in that moment. But I think love for each other is so important. And I do not care what kind of group you belong to, what beliefs you have, or whatever. Every human on this planet has a right to be here. So meeting each other with love will actually kill and eliminate the darkness. So if anyone can hear this, I think, just remind yourself that love is your game changer for yourself and for everyone else.
Amen to that. I love it. Thank you so much for being my guest, Lisa. It was my pleasure.
I thank you, Tanya. It was my pleasure too.